This is the Royal Report.
Good evening and welcome to the Royal Report. I'm Caroline DeRusso. Here's what's coming up on our program tonight. A royal exposé will hit bookshelves in just 2 days. We'll give you all the details. King Charles has hosted the South Korean president at a royal banquet. What does this mean for their diplomatic relations? And Esther Krakue joins us from London to discuss the latest Meghan Markle racism allegations. But before we get to all that, it feels like we have come a full circle in 18 months. Last year, in an interview with Oprah Winfrey, Meghan Markle made this claim.
When I was pregnant, all around this same time, so we have in tandem the conversation of he won't be given security, he's not going to be given a title, and also concerns and conversations about how dark his skin might be when he's born.
What?
That conversation I'm never going to share.
Now, this largely unsubstantiated allegation reverberated broadly, and at a time when race relations were unusually sensitive. Then yesterday, this was the front page of The Sun in the UK. More than a year on, and it's a rehash of the same allegation, only with twice the insinuation of racism. But this time the publication by Omid Scobie in his book Endgame is occurring in an environment where the public are becoming increasingly tired with the airing of the royal family's dirty laundry. We understand Omid Scobie is close to the Sussexes, but for the life of me, I can't work out what he's trying to achieve here. Is this simply a personal money spinner, or is it published with the Sussexes' blessing? Who are we to know? It isn't as though the Sussexes haven't had the opportunity to share their side of the story. And on first blush, the contents of the book appears to be largely based on information that's already in the public sphere. So why the reiteration? It's not like we've forgotten. It's not as though the allegations didn't reach the far-flung corners of royal observership and celebrity news the first time around. And anyway, while controversial allegations may seem to live forever, constantly reheating them can only lead to more unhelpful consequences and a continued distrust within the royal family itself. Joining us now is News Corp columnist Louise Roberts and entertainment reporter for news.com.au, Bronte Coy. Ladies, fabulous to have you back on the show. Now, Louise, I'll start with you. Omid Scobie's book Endgame is going to be released on the 28th. There have been advance copies already circulating to report on the book ahead of its release. The allegations, the reports, what it has to say, it's all coming very thick and fast. What are the main takeaways for you?
Hi, Caro. I think apart from Meghan's claim to Charles in private letters that there were in fact two racists in the royal family, which itself is very shocking to make that allegation, it's also the fact that Meghan has no interest in reconciling with Harry's family. She will not go back to live in England or the UK in general, and was very hurt by the royals and how she says they treated her during the Queen's funeral, the fact that she was snubbed from there. So there's a lot of information coming in around that as well. I think what's interesting is the fact that she has taken reconciliation off the table completely, according to this book, and yet Harry seems to have softened somewhat. That apology he has demanded over and over again for himself and for Meghan and for anyone else he feels aggrieved by his family, he's softened on that. It's almost like, well, if I get it or if I don't get it, but let's all reconcile, which really puts the two of them at odds with each other. He's keen to get back with his family. She wants absolutely no part of it. I thought that was very interesting. I think William is rather unfairly portrayed as cold and calculating, quite ruthless, engaged in some kind of pitched battle with his own father, and he's very impatient to become king. Now, of course, that's not going to happen until his father dies. So I don't really know why he would be, competing with his father in that way. There's also some allegations around Kate that she has always been very competitive with Meghan and would talk more about Meghan rather than talk to Meghan itself, and apparently sort of has a strange sort of reaction whenever she hears Meghan's name mentioned. So there's certainly, as usual, there's always people who probably won't go on the record to defend themselves, and including, of course, our favourite royal, Princess Anne, who apparently was very very involved in making sure that Frogmore Cottage was taken off the Sussexes and they could no longer live there. But to that, again, she won't defend herself over that allegation. But why would she get involved in that? I would think, as you know, probably our busiest royal, why would she get involved in the minutiae of who's living in a cottage on the estate? So again, a lot to sort of chew over. Some things are very familiar themes, as you say, but it'll be interesting to see what comes out in the next days as well.
Yeah, excellent insight there, Louise. And Bronte, I'm just more interested in this, I guess, in like a global sense. How does this book fit into the overall picture of the royal family and where the dispute currently sits between the Sussexes and the rest of the family?
Contextually, it's come at such an interesting time because, as Lou just touched on then, it's not just in the book that we're hearing that Harry is keen on reconciliation with his family. It does appear to be the case from a number of sources in the Sussex camp recently that he is making moves towards repairing that relationship with his dad. So it does seem to be the case that that is the strategy moving forward. And if that is the case, I can't imagine that this book, which we already, I'll reserve judgment until I can read the entire thing, but it certainly seems that from what we've seen so far, we are going to be rehashing a lot of the disputes over the last few years, a lot of those key disagreements. For example, the one between William and Harry when the Queen was in her final hours and he couldn't get onto William to fly with the family to Balmoral, things like that. That's going to be extremely unhelpful if it is the case that that Harry's trying to reconcile with his dad. So it has come at a really interesting time, and it's also the case that after a huge year of weathering these, familial issues, we are now at the end of 2023, and for these issues to be rehashed again, which it does appear to be something that is now going to be happening this week, it again is extremely unhelpful for the royals. Surely they're just thinking, it's been a year. We've had a big year of this. We've weathered it, and now we're going to be going back over old issues. So contextually, it's a very interesting time. I don't know that it will help the situation in mending fences, but we'll see, I suppose.
And Louise, speaking about rehashing disputes and going around the mountain again and again, what's going on with the invites for the Royal Christmas?
Well, of course, the ultimate event to be invited to if you're a member of the royal family is the Christmas at Sandringham, of course, which the Queen used to preside over. And of course, now King Charles and Queen Camilla will run that affair and that day. We believe that some of Camilla's extended family are coming along, but who is not on the guest list, of course, is Harry and Meghan and their children. And given the current environment, that current sort of ice sheet which is laying over the royal family and Harry at the moment, frankly, I'm not surprised. I mean, why would they be invited? And if they turned up, that would be very jarring because we're told that Harry and William aren't even speaking. So why would the future king have his brother there? It's an absolute mess, and really it's their doing in a way.
And Bronte, this again, contextually, this back and forth on every occasion about who does and doesn't get invited. Yes, of course we talk about it on this show, but it gets a bit dull after a while. Do you see it changing at all?
I don't know how long it will take for this to ease off for these big family occasions for a couple of reasons. I was thinking about this just earlier, and the reality is it feels like a really long time in a lot of ways since King Charles became the king, but actually it's only been just over a year. And also in that time, so many pieces have moved because we did have the release of the Netflix series and Harry's memoir. All of those things shifted the board with the royal family into different places. Things were strained already, but that's certainly changed it again. And now with these reports that Harry, possibly Meghan, but definitely Harry is moving towards reconciliation with the family, that's another piece again moving. And with Queen Camilla's family being invited to Christmas, I guess what I'm saying is there are a lot of things that are actually still up in the air after having so many years of a very traditional Christmas with the late Queen and, the same guest list every year and the same way that things would roll out. I suppose at the moment what we're looking at is a real changing of the guard in terms of how this is going to look into the future. So, yeah, I think we'll be talking about it for these big family occasions for a little bit more. But, until the situation eases with all of this back and forth between the royals and Harry and Meghan, the content's there. And I think that it'll be interesting to a lot of people.
And I think there's a lot of people that are a bit miffed too, Bronte, because apparently there's an upmarket boutique in LA which hosts a holiday hypocrisy window. And this year, Harry and Meghan are the stars of the show. Please tell us about it. This is fabulous.
Yeah, look, it's a bit of an unfortunate trend that's emerging in Hollywood at the moment. Of course, this is just a bit of fun. So it's a boutique in West Hollywood called Kitts, and it's very iconic and has a very, very good celebrity clientele that it's boasted for many years. And they do put quite tongue-in-cheek posters up in the window. And every year they have the Hollywood hypocrites. They've had Hunter Biden in the past. They've had Chrissy Teigen in the past, who's obviously had quite a few controversies. And this year it's Harry and Meghan, along with printouts apparently of articles talking about their hypocrisy in terms of taking private jets and also, you know, campaigning for ecotourism, etc. So, look, it's not great. It's obviously a joke and it's quite funny, but it does follow a bit of an unfortunate trend at the moment in Hollywood with them, off the back of South Park and off the back of the Family Guy sketch. They can't be loving themselves being parodied so much by their peers in the industry at the moment. So, look, a bit of fun, but probably, and they'd be concerned that it's a trend that is continuing.
And I think that's the point, right, Louise? Obviously, when a retail store feels like it can do something like that, it's fairly emboldened.
It is.
People are noticing. Everyone's noticing. This is actually an issue, though, for them.
It is an issue, and I think also they need to embrace the parody rather than sort of getting miffed about it and thinking that it's, you know, somehow destroying their brand. They should actually show they have a sense of humour and become more relatable. You know, South Park and Family Guy were examples of that as well. So rather than saying this is terrible, this is really bad for our brand, get on board with it. That would actually make them more likeable and, you know, real in a way.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, Bronte, the Sussexes attended a nice hockey game this week. We have some great photos actually from that event. Can you tell us about the appearance?
Yeah, and actually, just on what Lou said there with this, luckily we've seen them having a bit of fun this week, and that's what we'd like to see, you know, them, you know, either making fun of themselves or laughing at, you know, other people taking little funny jabs, but also them just letting loose, which is what happened this week. So they turned up at a Vancouver ice hockey game, and Harry did the ceremonial puck drop at the beginning. He looked very pleased to be there. It actually was following in the footsteps of his late grandmother, who did the exact same thing at the same place 21 years ago. So that was quite nice, a quite nice moment. But also, the two of them, what struck me, they've had a bit of a dramatic few weeks in the headlines once more, but they seem to be having a great time. So either they have, you know, it's all been water off a duck's back, or they're just huge ice hockey fans. But they were jumping out of their seat, they were dancing, they were drinking, they looked to be having a really good time. And that was all as in celebration of the fact that Vancouver will be hosting the 2025 Invictus Games. So it was quite a surprise appearance, but quite a happy one from the Sussexes.
Yeah, they did look to be having fun, and good on them. Like, they do still put up with a lot, that is true. Now, Louise, I've got a bit less than a minute, but even with the release of this new book and all manner of reports hitting the media, Princess Kate has still got time to, you know, attend to her passion project, which is early childhood learning.
That's right, and what a class act she is. She's not letting any sort of bad publicity or perceived publicity derail her from her. I really see early childhood as Kate's legacy. I mean, she set up the Royal Foundation Centre for Early Childhood, and it's not just some sort of you know, pretend outfit. It really does get into the weeds with real people, and she's got banks on board and she's got government ministers on board, and she's recognised quite accurately that cost of living at Christmas is a major, major issue for young families, not only in the UK but globally as well. So she wants to do whatever she can to raise awareness of that and help with baby banks and various gifts that can be donated to people to really help them at a difficult time of year. So she's not sort of dropped it as a project.
Absolutely.
If anything, I think this has completely emboldened her to really drive forward and make it her legacy.
Absolutely. Look, ladies, that's all we've got time for this evening. Thank you so much, Louise Roberts and Bronte Coy. Thank you so much for joining us. Coming up next, Esther Krakue joins us from London to discuss Meghan Markle's latest racism allegations. Welcome back to the show. Joining us now is writer and broadcaster Esther Krakue. Esther, King Charles hosted his first state visit since the coronation for the South Korean President and First Lady. A lavish occasion as always. Can you run us through the formalities?
Yeah, so this is King Charles's first incoming state visit, and it's a 4-day state visit, and the government obviously chose South Korea to be the first state visit for the king. It kicked off with a very lavish banquet with over 170 guests, interestingly enough, including the K-pop group Blackpink, which I'm embarrassedly a fan of, and a Birmingham City football player. You had all sorts of dignitaries and heads of state. Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, and his wife were there. Lord Cameron and his wife were also there, who is now the Foreign Secretary. So it was quite a lavish state affair. I mean, it had over 4,000 pieces, including sort of dinner plates and all the crockery that comes with it. It was a very lavish affair. The king was there with his wife and the Queen, Queen Camilla, the Princess Royal Anne, and Kate and William were also there as well, dressed to the nines. I think one thing to recognise is the significance of these kinds of state visits. So obviously South Korea is the 13th largest economy in the world, but in Europe, in terms of the amount of trade they do, we're actually only the 5th largest trading partner with South Korea. We should actually probably be the first or the second, given the size of Britain's economy. So this is a very important visit from the president of South Korea and his wife. We know that the reason why this state visit was chosen was because of the growing trade and infrastructure and security relationship between Britain and South Korea. Obviously, the government wants to woo South Korea to sign a potential green technology and infrastructure deal worth up to £30 billion. So it's obviously very important. But the reason why, the king was chosen to effectively head up this event is because these are the kinds of things that work. We know that the Queen, the late Queen, had many state visits during her time, and it actually went a long way in boosting Britain's relationships with lots of countries around the world.
Now on to the Sussexes, and Omid Scobie's new book Endgame is due to be released on the 28th of November. While it appears to be the rehashing of old allegations, it's now alleged that 2 royals made remarks about Archie's potential skin colour. Is that right, Esther?
Well, this is according to Omid Scobie, who has effectively got his meal ticket. He's someone who's reported on the royal family for decades, but now his alleged proximity with the Sussexes and having written their autobiography has meant that he seems to have an inside knowledge into what happened between the Sussexes and members of the royal family, at least from the Sussexes' perspective. At the end of the day, the issue of who commented on what the potential skin colour of Archie would look like has not really gone down very well with the British public. Particularly in my case, I mean, if I had a child with someone who was not black, my family with impunity would probably place bets on the skin colour of that child. I do think that there's an element of bad faith in terms of their interaction that this alleged kind of situation happened under. I don't think that it screams of racism to be curious about what the child of a biracial couple would look like. I don't even think that's particularly that interesting. I mean, when I saw Meghan Markle, I thought she was Puerto Rican. So I find it very curious that it's somehow now racist to assume what someone's child would look like. I also think there is a bit of unfair judgment going on here. I mean, Meghan Markle's mother was in an interracial relationship when she did have Meghan Markle, and I don't think members of her family would be accused of being racist for wondering what Meghan would have looked like when she was born. But obviously, we have to remember that Omid Scobie this is not an official sanctioned autobiography from the Sussexes. This is just something that Omid Scobie has written, given his proximity to the Sussexes, and apparently they're friends. This is something that's very much from his perspective. So we have to treat it with a grain of salt. We can't take it as the truth. And, it's very clear that he is benefiting, he's profiting a lot from his relationship with the Sussexes. I mean, a lot of the revelations from this book have been headline news here in Britain. So clearly there is money to be made. But if we're going to treat what he is saying as gospel and say that actually was more than one member of the royal family that was speculating about the colour of Meghan and Harry's child, I do think that there's an element of bad faith, and I don't think it screams of racism like the Sussexes at least would think it does.
In a similar vein, the book also alleges that the royal family chose not to get involved in the BLM movement. Now, I'm not sure whether that's an insinuation that the royal family is racist, but frankly, given the social and political bin fire that surrounded BLM, I think the royals probably did the right thing in staying well away from it.
Yes, I mean, it's interesting that now their proximity to the BLM movement is somehow a barometer for whether they're against racism or not. I mean, in the book, Omid Scobie said that, you know, in all his years of being a royal correspondent, he was surprised by their lax and laissez-faire attitude towards issues that had to do with racism and discrimination, which is, you know, very much, I highly doubt is true. You know, the Queen had relationships with many world leaders, and you wouldn't get the inclination that the royal family were in any way racist. So this is very much written from his perspective. I do think it was a wise move on the royal family's part to not get involved in the BLM, you know, movement. We do know that elements of the police, for instance, here in Britain, have really undermined public trust by seeing, you know, police chiefs bending the knee at BLM riots, for instance, in the capital, when it really had very little to do with Britain or our race relations here in this country. It was very much an American import, and it's something that has taken years to fight against and to unwind and to actually unpick the intricacies of actually race relations here in Britain and how they differ from the US. And I think instinctively the royal family knew that, which is why one of the reasons why they chose to stay away from it. Again, taking Omid Scobie's word on the royal family's approach to BLM or just movements to highlighting racism and discrimination is not very wise, because he doesn't seem like a very credible source. I mean, there are many questions around who his sources are in the royal family. It doesn't look like he has many friends in Buckingham Palace, and the only real contact he seems to have is with the Sussexes, who are more and more trying to distance themselves from this book. I mean, it's clear that they are trying to move on from this whole kind of royal family saga, even though this is a can of worms that they themselves opened by having that interview with Oprah Winfrey and Harry's book Spare. So they can't really complain.
And finally, one last thing. It's also alleged that William is trying to muscle his way into running the royal family. Now, the Prince and Princess have definitely taken on a greater share of the work, but that appears to be, from where I'm looking, part of the leaning and modernising strategy of the royal family. Do you think this Barb's a little bit cute?
I mean, I think it's completely ridiculous. He was obviously always going to be the future king. He doesn't have to muscle his way into something that is his birthright. But I also think you have to be reasonable and assuming that the reason why they've taken on more responsibilities is because they have fewer resources to draw upon. You know, one of the optimistic hopes of the Sussexes joining the fold was the fact that they were going to unburden senior members of the royal family by taking on more of this work. We're starting to see it with Meghan and Harry going to South Africa on their tour. But obviously that didn't come to fruition. And so, you know, the work has had to be spread out. The Edinburghs, the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh, have also had to take on a lot of work. They've been to Canada recently to have royal engagement. So I think it's more to do with the fact that there are genuinely just fewer people and fewer resources to draw upon, as opposed to, you know, William trying to muscle his way in. He is going to lead the royal family one day. That is without question. So he will obviously take a more leading role. But I don't think it's because he's greedy or power hungry or anything of the sort. I genuinely think it's just because that is the role that he was born into, and there are just fewer workers to carry out the work.
Thank you for your insights as always, Esther Krakue. Thank you for joining us. Now, just before we go, this Thursday, the Royal Australian Mint released a special 50-cent coin to commemorate the late Queen's 7 decades of service. It includes all 6 effigies of the Queen, which have appeared on Australian coins over the duration of her reign. What a fabulous commendation. Now, that's the show for tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. Up next is Newsnight. Good night, and we'll see you next week.